Hi everyone, it's Katey and welcome to my Oracle deck collection video. So these are all of the Oracle decks that are currently in my possession that I own as of late December 2018. So I'm going to walk through and show you briefly some of the cards and talk a little bit about what the deck means to me and how I use it or if I've used it. And yeah, I suppose without further ado we should get into it. But before we do, I will just say that these are in no particular order. This is more just to catalogue those decks that I have at this point in time, so I hope you enjoy. Okay, so our first deck, we will start with the Wisdom of the Australian Animals, which is this kind of unique little Australian deck that I got quite a while ago, and it kind of took a little while for this deck to grow on me. But it has. I think it's nice to have something in my collection that has to do with Australian animals, because so many of the animal decks, like, I'm not really big into animal decks, but some of them are beautiful, but almost all of them, I think the vast majority, I'm struggling to think of any other than this one, are, you know, full of animals that I'm not really familiar with, from, you know, largely the Northern Hemisphere. And, you know, those decks might throw in a kangaroo or a koala or something, but the majority are just, you know, bears and deer and all of that stuff that I have no familiarity with those sort of animals whatsoever. So it's nice to have a deck that feels, I don't know, like mine, like I know these animals. While we're on the topic of Australian decks, this is the Saltwater Reading Cards by Laura Bowen. This is my summer Oracle deck. I love Laura Bowen's artwork and her Oracle decks in general. If you followed me for any length of time, you'll be aware of that. I just love the colours that she uses. I love her guidebooks. I think they're really well done. And again, it's nice having something that feels like home in amongst so many decks that I can appreciate and I love but don't feel like home. I've done a review on this deck, and I've spoken about it quite a lot on my channel, so if you've followed me for any length of time, I'm sure you've seen this. Isn't that so pretty? And we have the companion deck, or the kind of the bigger sister, the Dreamtime reading cards. This was one of the first Oracle decks that I just fell madly in love with, and it's still amongst my favourite all-time Oracle decks, and it just is so beautiful. Feels very earthy and fiery to me, this deck. But it's quite well rounded as well. But I think it's a great complement to the Saltwater Reading Cards. They do feel very different, although Laura has her distinctive sort of style, the sort of colours that she uses and the way that she creates her art. She certainly has a voice as well that comes through in her writing in the guidebooks. Although it is very Laura, both of them, they do still feel very, very like two distinct energies, two distinct decks. And I always really enjoy the keywords that she's chosen, and I like that she kind of explains the meaning and the message really well. I think it makes for a really workable, interesting deck, and it doesn't just feel like correspondences that have been pulled out of a correspondence encyclopedia. You know, they feel like a representation of Laura's lived experience, which I think serves to make a much more personal, interesting deck. So this is one that I treasure. This is another old favourite of mine, and I have done a review on this deck. It's the Flowers of Love. It does come with like a book and everything that's in there. And it's like a much smaller sort of a size deck. And it's adorable. This is a deck that my mum got me, and I love it. I think it's such a sweet little deck, and it's a really interesting one too, because it kind of has its own little suits, I guess you might call them. They call them stages of love. and it ties in all different flowers and different mythologies and stories as well. So it looks like quite a simple, pretty little deck, but there's actually a lot going on. So it's just a really strong little deck that I think is really underrated because I just love it. I love working with it. I tend to use this deck in conjunction with a tarot reading. That's how I like using it. Often with the Gill Tarot, but not exclusively. Really just like this artwork too and the colours that are used. I think it's really pretty. Another little deck I have here is the Elements of Recovery Oracle. Now this is a really quite unique sort of a deck in that I wouldn't really say it's an oracle deck in the sort of way that we you know, use that word to describe a lot of decks. This is a very specifically intentionally created deck based on the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps. Beverly King has just really kind of tried to use that framework, but without all the kind of dogmatic Christianized language, which I really appreciate, because that language I always found quite difficult. I just think it's really cute too. Like, I love the simplicity of it. It's not super fancy or super overdone. It just kind of is simple and clear and I think rather effective. And it's just been a really beneficial one for me. It's helped me a lot. With my substance abuse stuff, but also just other things. I found it really great for kind of dealing with some of my thought patterns and habits around, you know, perfectionism and things like that. So I don't think it needs to be limited to substance abuse. I think it's a really great little deck that's quite versatile, actually. While we're talking about little decks, I will mention briefly this one. This is the Ogham Oracle. This was sent to me by the lovely Danny Lang. It does come with this little instruction booklet, and it's really quite simple. It's just these really simple cards with the title and then these little keywords that are associated. It's really interesting to me because it is this whole system that I'm totally unfamiliar with. So a simple little deck, but I quite like it. I like that it's simple. It kind of lets, I don't know, leave space for these symbols in this system to speak for itself. Now this, I'm just putting in the Oracle deck category. I know, you know, for people who have a large Lenormand deck collection, they might, you know, kind of separate them out, but I have this little Lenormand deck that I just purchased while I was up in Brisbane, actually, because I do like the idea of Lenormand, and I actually find these cards quite beautiful. I think they're really pretty. I don't know, I've tried a few times to get into Lenormand and it's just not really happening for me at this stage, but who knows, who knows. This deck was really quite cheap, so I don't really have too many issues with it just kind of sitting on my shelf for now. And if and when I get to Lenormand, it's there for me. Next, we have another kind of old favourite of mine. I don't know if I'd say old. I've had it for a couple of years. It is the Awakened Soul Oracle by Ethany, and I have done a review on this deck as well because I love it. Love this backing. This deck kind of lives at my mum's house quite a lot because she really likes it too. We both do. Just think it's a great little oracle deck, although it's not quite little, it's quite large actually. I think it's a great deck. I really, really like it. I love this artwork. I love how colourful it is, but also how clear the imagery is. I love that it's quite contemporary. It feels like, it just feels witchy, but today. And the guidebook's great. I love how she breaks down the meanings, and it's really directive and useful information in that guidebook. Although the cards do speak really well for themselves as well. It's not like you need the guidebook, it's just that Ethany's provided us with a great guidebook. So it's a wonderful deck to use. Now we have the Wisdom Keepers Oracle. This is a deck that really moved me when I first got it. and I did a review on it, raving about it. And I still love it. It's just the sort of deck that I feel personally I can't use all the time, just because I find it really intense and there's just so much here. And I've spoken before about how it just feels really intimate, and the guidebook is brilliant. There's so much info in there that when I do work with this deck, it's the sort of thing where I just want to spend a day, a week, a month. In fact, I spent a whole year with one card. So it's that sort of a deck where I'm not really, I mean, you can pull a card every day, that's fine. It's just that's not how I really feel like I want to use it, which means that I don't actually use the deck all that often. But when I do, I get a lot out of it. Just think it's really cool. And the colors are amazing, and all these like different symbols and lines and things that make up the different faces, I think is such a impactful sort of a way to portray the personalities and the lived experiences of these characters, and they all feel just so real. Okay, now we have the Tree Wisdom cards, which is a deck my partner bought me for Christmas last year, which was very exciting. These are by McLaughlin, and they are wonderful. These are really cool because I love McLaughlin's artwork. I have all of her decks, and they're all very different, but they still obviously kind of hold her style. And this is the sort of deck, this along with the Tree Wisdom, which I will show, not the Plant Ally. This is the Tree Wisdom. They're kind of really good complementary decks. They're very different, but I use them in similar ways. And so we get this beautiful, colourful image with this tree that's alive and has its own character with a keyword. And then on the back, we have what the tree is, the keyword again, and a little kind of description, affirmation, meaning, message, and this really cool backing. And I know a lot of people don't like oracle decks with the meaning on the back, which I can totally appreciate, but I think Lisa's done it really well in that the backings kind of all look very similar. So I mean, as long as you're not like looking, it's like when you're just shuffling, you don't really, you know, it's not, you know, super obvious which card is which, you know. So I think it's really well done, so that the back still feels like a card back. And the kind of companion or sibling deck, I suppose, to the Tree Wisdom would of course be the Plant Ally. And although the artwork is a little bit different, has a bit of a different feel, there are actually people and things in this deck, and it just, there's a lot more colour. I still use it in a very similar way. They do have very different feelings and energies to them, so I will use them in different circumstances, but I still use them in that same way of just a one card draw sort of a way. These are very, very colourful, very saturated, a lot going on, but again, they're the same sort of structure, I suppose, of the card, the keyword, and then our information on the back. And again, the backings are all really uniform, which I think is great. I think it's a great way to do, if you're going to have the information on the back. I think it's a great way to do it. And my third and final Lisa McLaughlin Oracle deck is in fact my favourite, and it was also the first that I got. This one actually does come with a guidebook, so it's a little bit different to the others. And in fact, this deck is really just very unique. It's quite different to the Plant Ally and the Tree Wisdom. It doesn't have the messages on the backs, but it kind of is divided into suits sort of thing. So the different suits have different coloured backings, but they kind of all have this same pattern. And this is just... This and the Dreamtime Wisdom, the Dreamtime reading cards would probably be my two favourite Oracle decks. I just adore this deck. It was by far the most used Oracle deck for me this year. And I love these messages, these keywords or titles of these cards are so interesting to me. They're really unusual from what a lot of Oracle decks will kind of put forth, like incorporate and value diversity. We have all these different fungi and mushrooms. Seek your inner wisdom. And so as you can see, the artwork between even just these 3 Oracle decks is really quite different. This deck is kind of based on the principles of permaculture. So it's just a really unique deck. Next up we have the Amethyst Oracle, which is kind of a companion Oracle deck to the Idiosyncratic Tarot. It's by the same creator, a very similar style. In fact, if you put the cards next to each other, they look like they belong together. Just there's a different color backing. This is an Oracle deck. I have worked with it, but not very much. It's a pretty new one to me. I only got it kind of second half of this year. Similarly with the tarot deck, I just love how clean and simple this is. Empty. Chai. I think it's just great, and I think it has some interesting keywords and cards, and I think it kind of portrays them in interesting ways. Next up we have a deck that is very special to me. This was given to me as a gift, which is just insane, from the one and only Veronica Jude. And it's kind of the companion Oracle deck, I suppose, to the Fantastic Menagerie, which is one of my favourite tarot decks of all time. So this is a deck that's a little bit difficult to get, especially for a reasonable price. And it's just so pretty. It's beautiful. As with the Fantastic Menagerie, it's based on the artwork by J.J. Granville. So if this sort of artwork seems familiar, that is why. His work is very famous. And I'm just really grateful to have it in my collection, because it's one I'd been wanting for a long time, so to receive it as a gift was pretty special. Next we have this deck that I always feel like an idiot trying to pronounce. This deck was given to me by my mother when she went to Paris. She picked it up for me. I love this backing. So this is a deck I've had for a long time. I don't tend to read with it very often, and that's not a language barrier thing. Like I think it speaks pretty well for itself, but it's just a really pretty deck. I really like it. I like that it's quite unusual. I don't know if it's widely available in France, but it's certainly not something that I've seen a lot in the Western world. And I don't know, just this was kind of the first deck. This kind of started off Mum's little thing of buying me Oracle decks when she goes away, or tarot decks, which just makes me happy. It's always a nice thing. She always gets me very interesting things that I wouldn't really necessarily think to get for myself, which is, I think, a great way to do it. This is an oldie but a goodie. This deck is not a perfect deck. I'm not pretending that it is, but it is a deck that I enjoy quite a lot. I especially like using it with Mum. Often if we're going for a little trip together or something, I'll pull a card from this for us, you know, for the weekend or whatever. It's just a really easy deck to use, and like I said, I know it has a lot of flaws, but it is just a deck that I like to use. It's a fun deck to work with, especially in that kind of more playful one card, you know, message for the day sort of a way. Next is another deck Mum bought me. This was the last time she went to Bateman's Bay. I think she got this for me. I've used it a few times. It has quite interesting sort of keywords or titles, and really colourful, pretty artwork. Again, this is just not the sort of deck I would have picked for myself, but I actually really quite like it. I think the keywords are really interesting and effective, and the art's just also very interesting. Just love all the lines and the colours. very flowy and, I don't know, organic almost. Next we have another Australian themed deck, again by Rockpool Publishing. This one is by Cheryl and Darcy, and I just love the colours. And again, as I said earlier with the other Australian based decks, it's just really nice to have something that feels like home. I'm not kind of like as cluey about plants and flowers and things. I see plenty of this when I go for bushwalks. I just think Sherilyn's artwork's really cool, and I know she's really passionate about flowers, and I think that certainly comes through in her work. Now we have the Goddess Oracle. This to me is kind of the quintessential goddess deck, and I have done a review on this one. I love this artwork. I love how soft and pretty it is, but how you know, it still feels authentic to the individual goddesses. The guidebook is incredible. There's so much info packed in, and there's like little ritual suggestions, and it's brilliant. I think, yeah, I don't think any goddess deck comes close to being as well-rounded and as beautiful and as interesting and as useful as this one, for me personally anyway. That's been my experience. Here we have one more Australian specific deck. This was actually my first ever Oracle deck, not this copy, but this deck. You can now get this, it's been republished by Rockpool actually, I think. But this is the older self-published version. There's been a few different versions of this deck, and this artwork is just really beautiful. Mel Bowen is an Australian Aboriginal artist, and she's kind of brought in her heritage as well as a more goddess-centric sort of a spirituality as well. But it's really interesting. It's really unique because it is kind of an amalgamation. It's a representative of Mel's spirituality as opposed to, you know, attempting to represent a culture's spirituality, if that makes sense. Which I think that's a great way to go about creating Oracle decks. I think it's really pretty. Love this. And the colours. So gorgeous. Our next deck is the Faeries Oracle by Brian Froud. Now I know this is a much beloved deck. I love that backing. Now this is a deck that I've spoken about how I have used it a handful of times, but not much. And I have struggled connecting with it. But I have also struggled letting it go. I very nearly put it up for sale on my recent, you know, decks for sale / trade video and changed my mind at the last minute. And there is something so interesting and alluring and captivating about this deck. I love that, you know, it's a bit of a different take on fairies than, you know, what we kind of see in like children's books. Because I do agree, I think fairies are should be represented as much more diverse and interesting and often fierce than I think, and weird and wonderful and almost alien than I think, you know, we often see them. And then of course I have the kind of sister deck, the sibling deck to the last deck, which is the Heart of Faerie Oracle, again by Brian and Wendy Froud. This one I haven't used either. I've had for a long time. I actually ended up with 2 copies of this somehow. I sold the newer one. It does feel quite different to the just the standard Faerie Oracle though. Just kind of going through it. I do like that you can actually kind of read the titles in this one too. I find that quite difficult for a lot of the cards on the regular Faerie Oracle, the original. It's very cool and interesting too. The artwork's beautiful. And again, depicting a wide variety of different types of fairies and it's much more elemental than, you know, as I said, a lot of fairy depictions, which I think is cool. So that is my Oracle deck collection as of December 2018. I do hope you've enjoyed having a look at all of these decks with me. There's quite a number of them, so thank you for sticking with me if you've made it to the end. I have done unboxings and reviews on quite a number of these decks. So if you're interested in kind of seeing these decks in more detail, do check out my channel for any of those videos. And I will leave a list of the names of these decks in the description below. So if you kind of missed me talking about any of them, or you didn't catch the name or whatever, check the description, they'll all be in there. But thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope 2018 has been a good one for you and that you're enjoying your holiday period, and I will talk to you again sometime soon. So much love. Bye.